Hey, I want to do a video today to address a question that I got from a viewer named Stephen Pierce. He asked me, if violent crimes with rifles, handguns, firearms, etc. are actually a safety issue, why does the government block the use of public monies into research regarding firearms violence as a public health issue or a public safety issue? Well, the first thing we have to look at, is that true? Does the government prevent public monies from being used for such studies? No, that's false. That is an outright lie to begin with. So it's hard to address a question such as that when it's based on false information, because all you can say is that's just not the case. What most people are actually referring to when they say that is the Dickey Amendment. And I will pause here for a moment while those of you that are so immature that you can't get past me saying Dickey without giggling, compose yourselves. Okay, that should be long enough. Hopefully you've got it together now. If you can't get it together by now, just go ahead and pause the video for a second. But what I'm talking about is the Dickey Amendment. The Dickey Amendment basically just says that organizations like the CDC, etc., can't use public money to promote propaganda that's anti-gun. They can't use public monies to try to deny a constitutional right that's guaranteed by the Second Amendment. They can do all the research they want, but they just can't use it for basically propaganda means. And that's what they wanted to do in '96 when this law was passed, because, Clinton administration wanted to get handguns out of the hands of ordinary citizens. Hillary Clinton is still fighting that fight today. So they basically had to say, Congress had to step in and say, no, you can't promote non-scientific garbage like you've been doing with the Arthur Kellerman report for years. If you aren't familiar with the Arthur Kellerman report, that's the one the CDC loved to use to say guns are really dangerous because if you own a gun, you're far more likely to injure yourself with a gun than you are if you don't own a gun, which is ridiculous in its own self, because that's like saying, just the premise is ridiculous, because it's like saying if you own a piano, you're far more likely to be crushed by a piano in your own home than if you don't own a piano. Does that mean owning a piano is dangerous? No, it doesn't. That's just a misuse of numbers. Now, it is true, because if you don't own a piano, the chances of you being killed by that piano in your own home is pretty much 0%. Whereas if you have a piano, at least there's some chance, no matter how remote it is, and that's infinitely more than 0. So they're not lying, they're just misusing numbers. And that's what Kellerman loved to do. He basically did that in a way that left out every other variable, like how many people don't get injured because they own a gun. Because we all know, even the FBI says that the vast majority of people that are defended by a gun every year don't have to harm anybody else. The gun itself being present is enough to prevent injury. So he completely leaves that out. It's basically like, let's say, the same study could be used if you use the same logic to say, let's say there's a virulent disease ravaging the world. It's killing half the population. Your chances of getting it are about 50 to 60% if you're alive and this disease is around. Well, then they develop a vaccine. And the vaccine lowers your chances of getting the disease from 50 or 60% to 0.001%. But here's the thing, that vaccine has side effects. And if you take the vaccine, you have a 0.01% chance of having a brain hemorrhage and dying. But if you don't take the vaccine, you don't have that much greater of a chance. Let's just say, well, you have a chance. If you take the vaccine, your head might explode. And if you don't take the vaccine, your head's not going to explode, but you're going to catch this other disease and die. Well, if that chance of your head exploding is only 0.001, whereas your chance of getting a deadly disease is 60% if you don't take the vaccine, taking the vaccine is still a good idea, because you factor in the fact that, well, if I take the vaccine, I might be far more likely to die from my head exploding, but I'm not going to get this disease that I had a far greater chance of getting. And if you used Kellerman's logic, you'd have to say, well, since there's risks from taking the vaccine of your head exploding, and those risks don't exist if you don't take the vaccine, don't take the vaccine. Makes no sense whatsoever, because you don't factor in the fact that if you don't take the vaccine, you're probably going to have something else happen to you that's far more likely, i.e. the disease. And that's basically what his research did. So it wasn't scientific. The scientific community has long ago established that there is almost no way to establish a correlation between inanimate objects like firearms and crime and violence. Most firearm crime is either domestic involved or gang involved, etc. And there's no scientific way to sit down and say, okay, if we take 10 people that killed their spouse, if they didn't have guns, if these people, all 10 of them used guns, if they didn't have those guns, they wouldn't have killed their spouse. Well, you can't say that because people kill their spouses without guns all the time. And you can't say that all 10 of those people wouldn't have resorted to rocks, hammers, or their bare hands to kill their spouse, and they still would have killed the same number of people. You cannot set up a scientific principle that actually bears weight to declare that the guns are the problem. And that's basically the scientific understanding throughout the community. They know there's no way to establish correlation between inanimate objects and the actions of people if they have other options. As long as if you take one variable out of that equation, guns, as long as there's other items that are easily available that can go in there that would fill the equation back to be equal the same at the bottom, you can't make any assignment of blame to that one variable being the gun. So most scientists aren't even interested in this information. The only people that are interested in doing studies are people that have an agenda to prove. Like they want to say, we want to take this little snippet of information and promote it out of context to make guns look bad. And the government says, no, we won't fund that. Like if UC Berkeley would say, we want to do a study that shows that people that own guns they get smaller dicks. Well, you could probably find information that would base that up, but the guns didn't cause the smaller dicks. You would be misrepresenting the firearm. You would be creating propaganda, anti-gun propaganda, and the government should not fund that. So that's all the government is saying. All the government said is they will not fund stuff that is used solely to defame firearms and to stand in the way of people exercising their Second Amendment right, which the administration at the time was wanting to do. They do not in any way say that you cannot do legitimate scientific study into the relationship of firearms to violence, crime, etc. You can still do that if you want to. It's just that most scientists don't want to because they know there's no point in it because it's a ridiculous premise to begin with. So stop spreading that lie that you can't use public monies for studies into firearms as they relate to public health, because you can. You just can't use public monies to promote your own propaganda and further your own illegitimate agenda.